Good morning. We continue in Ayin Beis, Volume 3, a summary and review. We have already learned this material till the end, but we decided to go back after learning some of the source material that Ayin Beis is based on in order to help piece together the presumed conclusion, being that the Rebbe Rashab did not finish the Hemshech, but based on what we have learned and based on earlier Maimonim from the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, we can try to figure out what the answers to the questions that remain unanswered would be, as well as the general plot. So we're up to page 1443, a very fundamental piece on Achdus Hashem, essentially how we look at existence through a God's eyes. Through our eyes, we know there's an existence, and we slowly extrapolate and try to climb the ladder to trace the roots and the source of existence, the divine energy within it, on all its levels, from Dibur, God's speech, God's thoughts, God's faculties, so to speak, attributes, all the way up to before the Tzimtzum, when God first envisions existence, and then even in Shmoi HaGadol, which is where the first time that we find that concept that God says there'll be another, a name which we call, which is only relevant to another. And that's Mamata Lamayl. And then there's Mamayl Lamata, the Yichud, in Shema Yisrael. We learn Mamayl Lamata, where we're drawing down that divine awareness from God's perspective. How does He see existence? And as we've learned, a bunch of steps on page 1442 and 1443, namely that all of existence is really Elikus, because that's the energy that creates it, sustains it, keeps it together, Markiv, all the composites of the Dal Yesedis. And furthermore, in this world, we learn from the Yisavas Hayesh, which is a Chidush Yesh Ma'ayin, from non-existence to existence, that God is Ein Arech Lecha, completely beyond. That's why He can create such a Chidush, such a leap. And that Chidush is the Bittul of Einoid, not just the Bittul of something nullified in the presence of something greater, but completely different reality. We have a different paradigm altogether. And from there, we continue to explain that in of Einoid. I'm looking on page 1442. And from the Yesh, we come to also learn that the same is with Ur, that even though Ur is a revealer and seemingly commensurate to its source, because it reflects its source, and it's Me'ein HaMoyer, and it's Dovuk, and it's attached to the Moyer, opposed to the Yesh, that doesn't have those properties. Nevertheless, we learn from the Yesh that Atzmus is beyond being a Moyer. He's not the source of light either. He's the source of light in actuality, but you can't define him as such. It's not his identity. It's not like a sun whose identity is to give off light. So Oid also is Einarech, and also the way Oid was created was also with a quantum leap. As we learned in the previous classes, I'm now ready on page 1443, to the point that from point of view of Atzmus, the Yesh and Oid, or what he called the Gashmi and the Ruchni, are equally distant. And just as one is created with a quantum leap, so is the other. So is Ruchni, so is Oir. Because Oir is a Gilir Tzeni, meaning God wishes it, desires it. It's not an automatic, not like light coming from the sun. And therefore it has that so-called element of recognizing the mystique, if you wish, the majesty, the beyondness, the transcendence of Atzmus. So also Oir, from God's point of view, is really the bittul of Einoid. However, today, Oir does not feel that. It feels bittul, but not that level of bittul. A level of bittul that is completely non-existent. That does not feel today. Ein ze nirgush by Oir. Because if it was, then there'd be no Eir, and we know Eir is a Metzias. It is carrying God's wishes. It is carrying God. It's a carrier, an expresser of God's energy. But a Me'ein Zeh, we said there is Efes Biltecha and the Eir HaKol Batzmusei. So you see here all these levels of Bittul, they all help us get closer to the fullest level of completely being subsumed or absorbed within Atzmus. But their levels, Eir HaKol Batzmusei, so each one serves a role in our so-called climbing the ladder and connecting on these higher levels. Well, La'osid Yinirgish, La'osid, in the future, near Nirgish Ba'er, V'yir B'chinas Einay. That's where we stop. But La'osid will be different. La'osid, once we've already done the Avodah, and we have integrated that Lakus within us, and we've expanded our containers, and we've climbed all the levels, and we've drawn both from the bottom up and top down, then Eid itself will also feel this higher level of Ein. So as I pointed out, from this alone, you have 3 levels of Bittul in Eid. As it is today, that Eid is Margish, the Eid not Kol Batzmusei, it's Margish Ein Zula Secha, like he said before, that God is beyond, but it's not complete, the Eid is as if it doesn't exist. Then there's the level Efes Biltecha Eir Kol Batzmusei today, and then there's La'osed, where the level of Einait, as he discussed. And here we'll continue the next line. The Rebbe Rashab adds of a Efsher. So Efsher means that Rebbe Rashab is adding something from his own that perhaps you can explain as follows. So we'll continue now. Around 2/3 of the way down, the line begins with B'chinas Einait, page 1443. You can follow the pages at ayinbeis.com, where all these pages have been scanned, PDF. So he says like this, and I'm glad I gave yesterday the long introduction about Neshamas, Oidus, and Kalim, and so on, because it's going to be very relevant here. But Efsher, perhaps you can say, Zehu, the idea that we just said, that La'osid, the Oir, will feel Einoid, in other words, it will see it from Atzma's point of view. That Eir itself, which on its own only recognizes that God is, of course, higher than it and its source, but it is a reflection of godliness. Only the Yesh reveals the Ein Areich, or the Einoid. But La'osid, the Eir will also feel that. So he says, Efsher, this is what we say, that in the future, Yekabel HaNefesh Ma'aguf. So today, the body is sustained by the soul. That's obvious. God forbid you take away the soul, the body is lifeless. So you need the soul in the body. The body is like the container. The soul is the Ur. So the guf is mekabel from the nefesh. But la'asid, it says that the nefesh will be mekabel from the guf. We learned this a number of times earlier. But now he's connecting it to this whole concept, and we'll see how there's a very profound and critical point here. Now, just to keep everything balanced here, you may recall the previous page when he spoke about the Yesh and the Kalim and the Rishimu, Einoid, he said, let's go back there for a moment, because remember, that is not the creation of Oir. That's not Nefesh. And Oir, that's not a Gili. The Kalim and the Rishimu are all concealed. That's the Koyach HaGvul, the ability to contain, to limit, to conceal. It's also divine energy, but it's not a revealing divine energy. And the Yesh, Agashmi, like you said, just reading, I want to go back to page 1442 because I think it's very relevant to understand what we're learning here now. So he says that Eir is Dovuk, which means it's connected to the Etzem, and that's where you can't say it doesn't exist. It's Kala, it's nullified in context or in contrast to the source. And it feels, like he said, Ein Zul Asecha, there's nothing but God. Aber Metzias HaYesh, Habittul B'chinas Eineid, Hainu Shebemis Einu Metzias Klal. The Yesh, the paradox of the Yesh is that on one hand it doesn't feel the source, and that alone teaches you how much the source is the only reality. A much higher Bittul than the Bittul of Eir, Eineid. Because the yesh has absolutely no substance of its own. Oir is a kaponim, is God's wish to reveal himself. Yesh doesn't have any substance of its own. It's God's wish to create. But the yesh compared to the ayin, as we learned, is a chidush, and therefore the only true reality is elikus. But then he goes on, he says, very similar to the words he used here, but in the yesh itself, we don't feel that. Because the yesh does feel itself as an existence because of the concealment. Well, the osid, however, bizgalus kain ba'yesh. The osid, things will change because after all the work where the yesh comes to recognize the divine through the Izbananus and through Avodas Hashem, through Shema and all Avodah that we've done over thousands of years, the yesh will be bizgalus. That's what he says, that the flesh itself will see the Dvar Hashem, Kipi Hashem Diber, Advar Hashem, Haino Aina Lekim Havese. And that's what we say that la'osi. Today you can say the goof is created by God, but no, it's not. It doesn't reveal godliness unless we contemplate on what we're discussing here. But the goof itself is a concealed state. But la'osi, the goof itself will become alakus because it will become saturated with this deepest level of eined. Be'emes kenu gam achshav. We don't feel it, and but furthermore, in addition to the fact that the body will become so refined that it itself will express godliness, we learn that the body actually will also, it says, neshama nizunis min haguf. Now that here he doesn't use the word nizunis, he says yikabel hanefesh maguf. But in some places it says nizunis min haguf. Nizunis is like from the word mozen. Like today, the body is sustained and nourished by the soul, and la'osi, the body will nourish the soul. And he brings the mimer from the Rebbe Marash, I don't have the page here, right here, but I believe all this was brought earlier, which is connected to what we're learning here. Okay, so what is the Rebbe Rashab coming to say? So he says, V'hainu, this is the efsher. V'hainu, and this means, Shaguf ye erein sof. It means, la'osid lavi, the guf will be erein sof. You have to understand what that means exactly. The guf, which is today not erein sof, it's the yesh, it's like a keli. What does it mean it'll be erein sof? Does he mean actually oir, or does he mean elikus? So we'll get back to that in a moment. V'nefesh, and they add a word in the bottom because it's seemingly missing a word. V'nefesh shahu, what's the hu? So they say shahu, they say shahu oir. The nefesh, which is oir, because that's what the nefesh is. It's like light, it's energy. The nefesh, which is oir, is a bittul de einoid. L'osid, it'll have the bittul of einoid. Okay, so we need to analyze these two lines. What exactly is he saying here? And he calls it an efsher, meaning it's like a chidush, that perhaps you can say this. Now, obviously, the Rebbe Rashab's perhaps is for us a vadat, is a certainty, but still, that's the expression he uses. So what is he saying here exactly? So on the very basic level, he's saying what he said earlier, that today the Eir doesn't feel the bittul of Einoid, of that infinite distance of Atzmus from Eir. The Eir feels that God, obviously Atzmus is higher than its source, but still there's something in common, because it's a Gili of Elikus. A Yesh cannot claim that, because a Yesh has nothing in common with the Ayin. The Yesh has nothing in common with Elikus, because it doesn't feel the source, not connected to it, it's not revealing it. It's just an entity that compels us to say, like we learned earlier, the Ein Arech. But La'osid, Oyer will also feel the Ein Arech. So he's saying that that's the idea that today the Nefesh, in the case of Nefesh and Guf, how does that apply? That the soul today gives energy and sustains the body. That's like Oyer, sustaining the Keli, the container, the body being the container. And therefore, it expresses godliness, it's the godly soul, and it is a force of revelation that gives life to the body. But it doesn't tell us about the Einarech of Elikus. The body does tell us. So the Osalavi, when it will be revealed, Oid itself will also feel the Bittul of Einoi that the body is aware of and will be aware of in a revealed way. La'Osalavi. That's the simple meaning what he's trying to say here. That's the Efsher. He's applying the idea of Oid, that today the Nefesh is sustaining, like example I gave, what Nahi gives, actually, the example that today the eye needs an outside light to see in the dark. What's that light? That's like the body cannot sustain itself, so it needs an outside force, the soul, the Oid, to give it life. The Oid sustains the Keli. But once the eye becomes so refined and it can access the Etzem Koyach Hariyah, it doesn't need an outside light. It itself gives off light. So once the Guf itself is revealing Asmus, so it doesn't need the Nefesh to reveal Elokus in it, because it itself is testifying to Atzmus, and on the contrary, it's testifying to a higher level. So then everything is reversed. Then the Keli, or in this case the Guf, is actually feeding the Oyer, the Nefesh, and it's revealing to the Nefesh this higher level of Atzmus that's higher than what Oyer itself reveals on its own. So in other words, the twist goes like this. Today, the Oyer is the Nefesh, and we need that. It reveals to us Elikus, and without it, we would not know. The body would not know what to do. Like I discussed yesterday, in the dark, you cannot walk on your own. You need a light. What's the light? The Nefesh. When talking about Nefesh and Guf. The truth is, it's more than just the Nefesh. It's also Teira Eir, Einei Ha'eda, the Malachim, everything we learned about the light that shines when the Neshama is down below. We'll talk about that in a moment. That is today. So on one hand, so then the Nefesh is the level of Oyer, and it's radiating and it's illuminating the darkness of the concealed state of the body and this world. And then, once we finish the Aveda, it all turns around. Not only does the body now also have its own divine light, it actually now reveals even a deeper level of the Etzem into the Oyer itself of the Nefesh. So even though the Nefesh in the beginning began to be the Mashpia, now it becomes the Makabel of what? Of this higher level of Eined, of Atzmus, that's completely Shalei Be'erech Ta'er. So in other words, not the Moyer and the Oyer, which have something in common, but how Atzmus is completely moved to Lagamri. And that's, he says, is the Efsher, that La'osid Lovi, that will be when the Nefesh receiving that from the body, this deeper level of Eined. That is, when you analyze what he's trying to say here, which is, of course, quite fascinating, how the whole thing turns around. But it's interesting what he does say. He said, Gufia Erein Sof. And by the Nefesh, we don't know for sure what the Rebbe Shab would have written because it's missing a word. But if he would have written Oyer, so you have to say that Erein Sof is higher than Oyer. Because Erein Sof, in a sense, is sensing the Etzem of Eined. And Oyer on its own doesn't sense that. But La'osid it will. But it's not so clear because he doesn't say the word Oyer. So I'm not sure what he would have written here. By Gufia Erein Sof, you have to say he doesn't just mean Oyer as in regular Oyer, like Oyer compared to Keli. You have to say it's Oyer, that will be revealed, that the Koyach HaEtzem will be revealed in the body. And as I explained, that even though it's rooted in Helam Ha'atzmi, but the whole Chiddush at the end of the day is that God is just as close to Helam Ha'atzmi as he is to Gili and Oyer. So even though the Helam Ha'atzmi is a deeper level compared to Oyer, but from Atzmu's point of view, Yecholte Shalei Lahoyer and Yecholte Lahoyer are all one. His capacity to reveal, his capacity to conceal are all one. So at the end of the day, if you go from Atzmu's point of view, the Yesh, like we said, the Gashmi and the Ruchni are equal. So the Oyer and Gili and Helam are equal. So in that sense, the Gili will be a Helam and the Helam will be a Gili. So the body reveals more the deeper level of Etzem that's beyond Gili. But that itself will become revealed. And on the other hand, the Oyer, which only reveals a lower level of Elikus, it itself will also begin to experience the Atzmisdika part of it. So essentially, both entities, one which was a revealer, the Nefesh, and the Oyer, one which is a concealer, both will experience Etzem, but obviously it's the guf and the keli that reveals the etzem in a deeper way, and that ultimately feeds the oir. But you have to remember that the oir, for so long, also fed the body, nourished the body, like we discussed. So they both will be equal partners, and each one will contribute its role. So we have both milas, the mila of etzem and gili, with the yesh and the keli and the guf revealing etzem or expressing etzem, and the oir expressing gili. One more point I want to make is right now he's talking here the nefesh and the guf. What about Torah oir, ner mitzvah? What about the giluyim, the malachim, and all the? I don't want to compare malachim to Torah, but all the other oirs that are the siyua that help us in our avodah. Because even though the nefesh is true, the nefesh has this capacity. I'm sorry. Even even though the nefesh is a oir, like you just said, we discussed yesterday, what would a body be without a neshama? It'd be lifeless. And if it'd be lifeless, without a chelik alekam and mal mamish, without a soul, we have altogether no awareness of godliness. So I discussed that on one hand, the nefesh is like an oir, but it's still an oir that's subject to concealment because the neshama does mislabish in the guf. Torah oir is never mislabish in a guf. Torah oir never assumes a body. It never goes into the body and the animal soul. It illuminates and it engages with them. But the Torah remains, as he explains in Tanya chapter 23, li hester ponim. The Torah is God's words. It always remains. It always remains the flame, fiery words of God. They're always revealers. So that's why Torah has such a power because it directs and guides us. Torah meloshon hera. Eiraisa actually in Aramaic also means eir yaisa. It draws, it's mamshich, it brings light. Torah is fundamental light. What it does is it helps ignite and fan the flame of the Ner Hashem Nishmasodam. So the neshama is a form of light, but it's a light that manifests within the darkness of the body and the animal soul, as we see. So it is there. So you do have you have that divine consciousness within you. It's called the Nefesh Elikis. But like he explained in the Maimer HaMagbi, that it can achieve certain things in Shema, but it's still only the level of Shema, he explained, not Riyah. You can't see Elokus. But through Torah, Torah reveals higher levels and all the way to the highest levels of But then everything turns around. That both the Nefesh and Torah both receive the Neshamas Amashpi and Torah once they reach their higher level rooted in Etzem. And now we're learning that the Guf is Mashpi into the Neshama. So basically, the neshama has an aspect of Ur in it that's subject to Helam. Torah does not have Ur that's subject to Helam. On the other hand, the neshama ultimately, therefore, is able to be mashpia into Torah, and the guf is able to mashpia into neshama. And all of that comes together. Just wanted to add that point here. We will discuss this more. This, what I just said, is not explicit in Ayin Beis. I don't think I've seen it in any mimer, but it seems to be the right shot once you learn it all, understanding the distinction. I have to look around. Maybe he does say it somewhere more specifically. I have to look. But right now, based on my memory, this is how I understand the picture. Okay. So that was a mouthful, a full idea. I'm going to stop, of course, if anybody wants to ask any questions.
I just wanted to make sure I understood or I heard you correctly in the last summary. You said the neshama is a revelation of or subject to concealment, and the guf is a concealment that's subject to revelation, and Torah is a revelation that's not subject to concealment. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
My shaila, the follow-up is and I'm not even sure I should ask, but I think it'll provide further clarification. When we say that the guf will reveal an aspect of Elokus that Or can't, do we mean that in the sense of we'll learn from the guf like we are kind of beginning to learn now, this notion of what it means for the Eibishter not to reveal the koach hagvul. In other words, it'll indicate on it. But it won't necessarily reveal mamash. Or is it dafke? It will reveal, like you said, the the areach, the the moon will reveal. I forget the pasuk, like we talked about, will reveal just like the sun. It'll be mamish. It'll be mamish a revelation, like mamish light. Or like, do you understand the difference? Is it going to be more? We're going to learn from the goof about the helm, the light that's concealed, or it's mamish going to shine. Like I don't mean like a flashlight, but I mean, well, do you understand the question, or it might be?
The answer is both.
Uh,
Today, it's more learning because we logically deduct this
right.
from understanding that since the yesh is so infinitely distant, you have to say er is also. But la'osid, everything will be nigla, revealed like we see it with our own eyes, more than just awareness.
Conceptually. Uh-huh. Yeah, it's hard to wrap one's mind around it. I mean, makes
Well, that's
perfect
why it's
sense.
not lost love it. That's why we are
Yeah,
not.
I
We're
know.
still.
It's frustrating, right? It's just frustrating because we won't know it until we're there. We
No,
can
but you can imagine, just like
conceptualize.
there are things that you see right now with the total clarity, just like you see Gashmius, we're going to see Ruchnius. We just can't experience it right now in the fullest sense. Only a me'ain of it, a taste of it.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
just think of it that it'll be our given reality. Whereas today it's more of a novelty. It's more of a chiddush, like something an innovation. They,
Very nice. Thank you.
well,
Thank
all of Chassidus is coming to give us a taste of what Elokus is like. And the more you learn it, the more you begin to perceive it. The more you perceive it, the more it becomes your reality.
you. Reality. Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful.
And can I missed the part of it. I was listening because I was out, but I heard you say that they both said they were the Rebbeim said that they were both at the same level. I didn't understand the source of where it says that the goof is higher. That's all I want to know. I mean, which Rebbe said that? Thank you.
That goes back to the Alter Rebbe. I mean, this is one of the fundamentals of Chassidus, that that though an Neshama in Giluyim is higher, but the Guf has an element. Well, in a Gersa Kedesh Simachov, he says the Yesh, a Nivra, indicates on the Yesh Amiti, an Atzmus, Shisim Atzmuse. But in other places, it talks about the Guf having an element of revealing, like he's speaking here, the Yesh, the Guf, because of its not feeling its source, it actually reveals that the source is beyond being a source, essentially.
Okay, I sort of got it. It just what it was. In other words, the preamble to this that we're reading in Ayin Beis, which I was listening to while sitting in the car, it seemed to say that they were at the same level, but it's from earlier sources. Okay, thank you.
So I have two questions about that. If this is the case, why do we take it for granted that the neshama is the more spiritual and closer to God? And secondly, if the Rambam believes that the neshama is higher, why does the Rebbe tell us to study the Rambam and not the Ramban around the laws of Mashiach and all of that?
Well, one question is answered with the second question. There's no doubt that the neshama is superior to the guf. All you have to do is think about it, and when you learn Tanya, it makes it very clear there are two nefashos inside of us. One is called the divine soul. That's the neshama. That's the nefesh elokis, and what's called an animal soul, which relates more to the body. So, on a very basic level, the divine soul is what is about divine consciousness. The body and the animal soul have no divine consciousness at all. As a matter of fact, we learned in the Maimer HaMakbi, all their interest is self-interest, is materialistic, selfish greed, narcissism, whatever it needs. Like he explains in Tanya, in a number of places, especially chapter 9, it's driven by its emotional impulses, by all its temptations. And I think, again, you don't need any raya, you don't need any proof. Just look at ourselves. You know, if you follow your bodily impulses and your bodily desires, it's not going to lead you to God. Now, that's on its own. Then avodah begins. Since we have free will and we have these two souls, so there's a battle between them. And the battle is meant to be won by the Nefesh Elokis, but it is a battle. It always remains a battle. Even the Beinoni will always battle. The battle over thought, speech, and action, who will control that? That is a given. Chassidus comes and then says, a chiddush, that since everything's created by God, even the yesh, so though the yesh, no one's going to ever say a Atzilus is lower than Asiyah. Of course Atzilus is higher than Asiyah. It's called Elyon. Elam is Elyonim. They're higher and higher levels, with Yitzira, Asiyah being the lowest level. Yitzira, Bria, Atzilus, Keser, Nikudim, Akudim, Ak, Kav, Tzimtzum, Lifnei Tzimtzum. There's a hierarchy. And there's no question, the higher you go, the more the Giluyim of Elokus are. But then comes another element, that since God created everything, and he created the Yesh as well, there's something he embedded in that process that revealed that, I don't know, say the word reveal right now, we'll call it expresses an element of Atzmus that is not revealed in any of the higher worlds. Like he says in Tanya chapter 36, that you have to say the kavanah of Dir B'Tachtenim is an Atzmus, and you can't say the kavanah is Elam Esalyenim, because Elam Esalyenim, at the end of the day, they're revelations of divine, and they're far higher than Tachtenim. This world is called Tachtenim. Tachtenim means the lowest of all worlds. He says, Tachten she'ein tachten l'matim men. Why? Because it's the darkest world, a world where the wicked prosper, the good suffer, full of challenges and corruption and so on. But the kavanah is dafka in this world. So it's not because this world has more gilui, it's because this world has more intention. That's what God's plan is. And Elam Esalyenim, he actually calls Hayil Ulahem Yeridim Me'er Panav Yisbarach. Different explanations what that means. Not so relevant to our discussion. Well, it is to some extent, but I don't want to go into that right now. So now in this yesh lies an element of atzmus in the nesavik. First of all, God's desire to have the yesh and tachtenim, and secondly, as he explains in the Geras HaKedesh that I mentioned before, that because the yesh, precisely because it does not feel its source, and precisely because it claims I'm self-made, that itself, the Alter Rebbe's Machadish, comes from an entity that's truly self-made, which is atzmus, mitzuse matzmuse. So that's where the guf has that quality. And that's an additional point, that once the neshama, through thousands of years of work of refining the body, reveals in the body that atzmisdika element, and then the body has something to contribute to the soul, that, like he says here, that the nefesh is makabel from the guf, that element of it. But it never takes away from the nefesh's qualities of being a chelik elikam and mal mamish, especially in the level of giluyim. So you just have to understand different aspects of it. It's not competition between the two. As far as the Ramban and the Rambam goes, it's elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. They both have legitimate points. The Rambam is saying, an neshama in giluyim, an neshama simply understands more than a body could ever understand. Because it's like it says in the Mishnah, Yafasha achas b'tshuva ma'asim tevim ve'elam hazim mekol chay elam haba. 1 hour of tshuva and good deeds in this world is worth more than all the world to come. Can you imagine? The whole elam haba. All the Gan Edens and everything in the future, everything in the higher worlds. Then the same Mishnah says, Yafasha achas shel kedas ruach. 1 hour of pleasure in elam haba is worth more than all the pleasures of this world. So the answer is obviously, when you talk about pleasure, divine pleasure, elam haba is far superior. 1 hour is worth than all the pleasures of this entire world. If you're talking about purpose, what's God's kavanah? 1 hour of avodah and in the darkness of this world is worth more than all the giluyim of elam haba. So the Rambam is focusing on the mile of a neshama. So he's saying mile of a neshama. So the reward for a neshama is a superior reward than the reward for the guf. So you reward the body, but it's not the permanent. So the Rambam is speaking from a ruchniisdik or giluyim dika perspective. The Ramban is speaking from an atzmisdika perspective, that ultimately the goal is dira b'tachtenim, the gili of atzmus, and that the body expresses at least as much, if not even more, than the soul. So they're both great leaders. We learn Rambam, we learn Ramban. The thing is, the Rebbe did not. Why the Rebbe did not make a Rambam? Rambam didn't write a Sefer Mishnah Torah. The Ramban is a commentary on Torah, and we learn it. We learn it like we learn all Torah. It's not a rejection of the Rambam when Chassidus does not accepts the Ramban's psak of the reward. It's not a rejection. It's on the contrary. The Rambam is teaching us a very important lesson about the power of a soul. And the Ramban agrees with them. No one disagrees that the soul is superior to the body in the sense that it is a divine entity. And therefore it has all the awareness that a neshama has that a goof will never have. But the goof at the same time expresses and reveals ultimately an aspect of atzmus that the neshama doesn't fully on its own necessarily express. But then they join together. At the end of the day, it's all one God, and therefore neshama and guf become one, all in the achdus Shem Echad of expressing the etzem begili and the gili of the etzem. So it all comes together.
Thank you. So then the way the neshama is nizonos from the guf is through the guf showing it that it's coming from atmos and from a place of there's no beginning. That's the way that neshama is nizonos from the guf?
Well, on a very basic level, the neshama doesn't want to come down below. It says al karcha chatachai. Neshama doesn't. Why should it want to come down to a dark, corrupt world? But then, once the neshama comes down, it says al karcha chatames. The neshama doesn't want to leave because it senses the desire of God of Torah and mitzvahs in this world, and that the neshama on its own would not have recognized because it's a spiritual entity. When you're living in a spiritual environment, and your personality is a spiritual personality, you don't appreciate Gashmias. But then the neshama comes to learn and understand that that is the ultimate kavanah, not to remain in the heavenly spiritual realms, but to come into a dark world, and in that darkness to reveal godliness. And then the neshama realizes that. So on one level, it's the consciousness of the neshama gets elevated, but also its experience. The neshama, remember, the neshama is a godly soul. It's looking for God. The goof, it's like learning from your student. In the beginning, a teacher is superior to a student. And yet there's something you learn from your student. The neshama will learn something from the goof that it's sustaining. And one of the things it learns is, like we learned here about Oir, that Oir on its own, because of its revelation, reveals the divine revelation parts. What about the etzem that's not subject to revelation? That you learn from the power of concealment. And there's many other ways to explain this. There's a lot that can be said on how how Oir and Neshama all elevate through the work coming down below. We're going to learn more about it later. But this is the whole idea of why Neshama comes down below in the first place. Firstly, to illuminate and educate the body. It doesn't come down for its own needs, but then the Neshama will benefit from it as well as the Guf, learning from the Neshama. Remember, it goes both ways. We need Torah, and we need a neshama. The goof can't manage on its own. There's no way it could do anything on its own, because the goof is just a lifeless, empty shell. And if anything, its consciousness is all about selfishness. It's about its own needs. So it's not going to figure out God on its own. It's possible that it could sense something, but it's not going to really have the power to elevate. Look, as I said, even with a neshama and even with Torah and mitzvahs, look how challenging life is. So imagine what a goof would be like without all of that, those resources.
Thank you so much. Beautiful.
Also, I'd like to add that isn't it true? I mean, that Rebbe chose the Rambam because it talks about Mashiach more than any almost anybody in the Torah. Is that? I mean, that's what I thought the reason. Maybe
well,
I'm
the
wrong.
Rambam is the only halacha sefer that talks about Mashiach, because Shulchan Aruch only talks about what we call not Hilchas of the Mashiach. It doesn't talk about the future. When you open up a Shulchan Aruch, the four Chelki Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim, and Yeridea, Chesed Mishpat, and Even Ezer, they only talk about halachas for our time. The Rambam is the only one that talks about Beis Hamikdash and talks about the future, Mashiach. That's true. As far as the Rambam goes, in general, just for the record, if you look at the end of the Rambam, you don't find about Chiyas HaMesim. He talks about it in Hilchos Tshuva, but not in Hilchos Melachim. The Rebbe has a whole discussion about it, because the Rambam was talking what he knew for sure. And as one of his letters, he writes that Chiyas HaMesim, like I said, according to his opinion, is not a permanent reward. But he says that if it's to be proven otherwise, he would accept a different approach. So there's more to say about the Rambam as well. I don't want to go into it right now, but yeah.
It reminds me the King David words. I learned Torah and found the piece of gold. What you just said, for me, we just reached the piece of gold of all Hasidim and Ayin Beis in particular, because when you said, and it's very, very precious for me, the more you learn, the more you perceive, you will do it your reality. And for me, it's echo with words when the Mashiach will come, and the answer when all the world would be aware of your teaching. This might be like a mission statement for all. Whatever you just told, it's a piece of gold.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah.
The way I've been thinking about it is that it says that Albert Einstein was looking for the unified field theory for the last 30 years of his life, and he was never able to achieve it. He was able to bring all of existence down to energy and matter, but he wanted to bring it down to one equation, just one unity, the unified field theory. Here, we're talking about neshama and guf, which a neshama could be energy and the guf could be matter, energy and matter. So it says that it seems like what we're describing here in Ayin Beis so eloquently, so amazing in Ein Od, is that the two of them will become united in a level of Ein Od where they will be unified in godliness, and which is the ultimate unity, which is the ultimate objective that Einstein and a lot of scientists have been looking for the whole life, but they could never find. And we find it right here in these pages in Ayin Beis, which is extraordinary, in my humble opinion.
Go ahead,
Well
Rabbi.
said.
That's beautiful.
Well said. And yeah, the beauty here is, as I think I mentioned a few classes back, that in general, if you go to all schools of mysticism, they will all talk about two worlds, the spiritual and material. But Torah talks about the world of Kedusha, of Elikus, that's higher than spiritual and material. It's the only place where you really can integrate body and soul. That's why, for example, if you read, I don't want to bring other books, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, for example, which was a big classic in the Buddhist world, where they talk about the biggest fear people have is the fear of death. And you have to overcome that fear by realizing that life is really not physical, it's spiritual. So your fear is only because you don't want to lose your physical life. But the spiritual life, in a sense, like Olam Haba, like I don't want to compare it to the Rambam, but similar. That spirituality is your reality. And that's how, and it's very compelling. It's very resonating. That spirituality is your reality. Don't worship materialism. Materialism is temporary. It's mortal. It will erode and perish, perishable and mutable and all that. And you want eternity, that's in the world of spirit. Spirit is the only world that never dies. The soul never dies. The body dies. And body, I mean everything material world, your looks, your youth, everything in the physical world is subject to erosion, to age, deterioration, and ultimately perishing. Whereas the spiritual lives on forever. That's all true. We agree with that as well, of course. Sham is nitzchis. The Sham is forever because it's a piece of godliness. But then comes the higher level, because there if that's the destination, spirituality can be like Chassidus says, yesh misha oyev. You can love God and still be a yesh. You could be very spiritual and be a yesh as well. That's why you find in a lot of Far Eastern spirituality, there's a lack of discipline in a lot of areas that are not ethical, especially in sexual areas, because there's no halacha. There's ultimately no bonding. It's like the body means nothing. So the goal is reach spirituality. In Torah, yes, the soul is definitely superior, but you have to bring it back into the body, and you need discipline, and you need halachas, and you need boundaries, and you need to build a family, and you need to be loyal, and you need to be committed. And you can't just say in the name of free spiritedness, everything goes, and we're all connected. The same time that we have that so-called, we'll call it transcendent unity that spirituality introduces, we don't forget that there's a world that this needs to be integrated. Rotzei, shuv. And when you don't have the shuv, you're lacking a certain element of bittul. And yes, you can become a very spiritually arrogant person and still give in to your bodily desires, even though you're claiming the body means nothing. But because at the end of the day, your ego wasn't completely destroyed necessarily. The goal in Chassidus is to come back, not just iskafia, in other words, discipline, but also ishapcha, to transform the body and the animal soul, that they too should love God. That's a tremendous chiddush. If you wanted to write a paper comparing other schools of spirituality to Torah Chassidus, that's one of the key differences. The element of mitzvahs maisius, that you need to be refined in this physical world also, not just that you're a greatly sublime person, know how to reach the highest levels of spirituality. And that's only because there's the third level where guf and nefesh is higher than gashmi and ruchni and guf and nefesh. And that I'm just embellishing on what you said about the unified field theory. Absolutely.
I agree. There's two goals. There's the goal that Miera was talking about, and Eliezer, the unified field theory, is to me gold also, because it's unbelievable. This is the merger of waves and particles. It's just absolutely wonderful. A great point.
It seems like the machlokas are not between Rambam and Ramban is very essential, because if Chassidus Chabad had machriya and decided ultimately, or the Rizal, that the Rambam was correct, that the ultimate existence is just nefesh, no materialism, there will just be spirituality for eternity. So then you would the goof, the mitzvahs, that part of existence that we've experienced would basically have been a transient existence, and would not have the ultimate emergence of eternity that it has under the Ramban, who says no, the ultimate eternity, netzach nitzachim, is a neshama b'guf, both together. And
remember, this is also connected to another disagreement among Kabbalists about the concept of light and containers, whether light has particles or not, and whether the spheres are oiris or the kelim. It's a very big discussion in the broader sense of Chassidus, and both ultimately are right. The Rambam, we talk about the Rambam, we don't look at it a rejection of the Rambam, because the Rambam is talking from the perspective of Ruchnius and Elam Haba. The Rambam is correct, but there's other perspectives, there's other elements to it. So the Rambam is revealing to us the Maila of the Neshama, which is beautiful. But the Ramban is revealing the Maila of the Guf, so to speak. So it's not, at the end of the day, Chassidus more than just reconciles. It comes to understand that all these different opinions are just different parts of the puzzle. Each one's talking in their world, so to speak. Like Shammai and Hillel. Shammai is in Gevura, Hillel is in Chesed. So in Halacha, obviously, you can only rule according to one. What's the final ruling? But every one of them illuminates a quality that we need to appreciate. Just want to make that very clear.
This discussion reminds me of, was it Malachi, that says, in the end, God, the fathers will return to their sons, and their sons return to their fathers, their hearts of the fathers. You know that.
Heshiv levavis al banim, right?
Right now, the Torah is the nefesh is guiding the body, but eventually, like the father's teaching the son. But eventually we have that, what was that, mutva, murgash, and muskal. Those will grow through our avoda. Eventually the son or the child, the body, which needs direction from the nefesh, from the Torah, will reveal, come even higher, and will be able to give back, so to speak, and elevate the nefesh itself, the nefesh neshama itself, the gufel, which reminds me of the famous just got talk you once gave, Rabbi. I think about it a lot, where you talked with the doctors, and you told them in the see Laveau there won't be any sickness. There was a room full of doctors, right? A few hundred doctors. And one of the doctors raised his hand and said, "But Rabbi, what are we going to do? If there's no disease to cure, no sickness in the body, what's our purpose going to be?" And if I'm correct in what you said you have an ultimate understanding of the body more than all of us, and you'll be able to show how godliness is revealed and manifested in the body.
From our flesh we behold God. Right?
So that's turning the tables, meaning that's saying the body, we're going to learn from biology and all the physicality of the world, and that's going to teach us godliness in a level higher than
it's beautiful. I know it's amazing.
But that's correct. I do correct you. Am I correctly quoting you in that? Because I referred to that.
Yeah, that is correct. It's exactly what I said. That their intimate knowledge of anatomy and biology and chemistry, etc., and dermatology, can go from A to Z, will reveal the godliness. Like we say, "From my flesh I'll behold God," or astronomers can teach us, or physicists, the secrets of God within the atom, in the DNA, etc. Yeah, it's so poetic and eloquent ultimately, because it becomes one unified whole of a physical world revealing the spiritual, and on the other hand, the spiritual learning from the physical.
Rabbi, I have a question. It just occurred to me, and maybe there's no shaykhus at all, but you wrote a beautiful essay on Parshas Mishpatim that was really brilliant. And it started
logical, that one.
Yeah, it's logical, right. And I'm wondering if there's any parallel connection, or even direct maybe, between the notion of Oros and Kalim and super rational and rational, meaning that the super rational would be like spirituality and aura and light, and the Kalim would be like reason. Have you ever drawn those parallels?
Yeah, but you could also make the argument the other way around, that Oyer is more the conscious and the rational, and the Kalim are rooted in the supra-conscious. So you can go both directions.
Well, obviously, no, I hear you, but okay, so there is a corollary, and I'm wondering how this is maybe a subject much longer than just like Al Regal Achas, but I had dinner last night with a dear friend who's Dati Lumi, he's a modern Orthodox, but a very, very firm guy, brilliant guy. And he just cannot wrap his head around this ethereal stuff of Chassidus. And I tried to, I explained first of all, I asked him to explain to me some like Gödel's theory of whatever consistency. I can't even repeat it, but you said.
Can he understand the idea of subatomic particles?
We talked about that too. And I said to him, he understood the science that you invoked. And I said, oh, for the rest in the class, the notion is that even rational systems ultimately depend on something that can't be proved. So what's so great about logic? If at the end of the day, just like religion, it depends on something like you can't prove God's existence per se. And whenever I drift into this area of what the people call the ethereal, they look at me like I'm crazy. And I just sort of wonder, I'm talking about a really, really good man, a really firm guy, a very well-intended, brilliant. And when I talk Hasidus to him, he looks at me like I'm crazy. And I don't know how I can how do you break through that when people are they only want to understand what they can understand rationally. And it's very frustrating. And like my wife too, and God bless her. Of course I love her. She's a beautiful woman. But when she tries to listen to me, she kind of indulges me. And then she goes off and she's into, just nigla. And I don't know. I don't know what to do how do you spread Chassidus to people that just don't want to break through what you can't see with your eyes?
You choose your battles. basically, some people, I don't think you have to see it as your crusade to have to win this over. You know, you say what you have to say, and either they relate or they don't relate, or it takes time for them to relate. I don't. I've met many people like that, obviously, and I give many classes. Some people just automatically, naturally, like a fish in water, respond to spirituality as actually more real than material.
Right.
Not only is it also exists, some people see that's the only reality, like you're saying here. Elokus is the reality, and Metzius is, but like, you know, so to me, it comes down to, I don't want to analyze this individual. I don't know what's blocking him or not. Maybe it's his religion that's blocking him because he's so used to Yiddishkeit being not Ruchniistic. He sees Ruchnius as some type of like New Age psychobabble.
Right.
That could be one reason. There could be many different reasons. You have each person according to their way. Let's, instead of talking about spirituality, let's talk about the ethereal in our real lives. Is love a material or ethereal? Does he have love in his life?
Well, I talked about that too. I told him out just like you wrote.
No, but I'm saying, so what's that? How does he explain love?
I don't press him because, you know, I just try to explain. But
Okay,
yeah.
so then I don't know what to say. Then he's not in the conversation here, so I can't talk to him through you. Each person, you try your best, and I don't think, again, I don't see it as a mission to try to convince someone. You know, the famous classic example I give with Sir Arthur Eddington's analogy of the fisherman with a fish, with a net. I brought this example.
Oh, yeah. You're the yeah. Sorry, give it over again, but it's yeah.
Yeah, but basically you can't catch, if you're going to use a net with 5-inch spaces, you're never going to catch fish that are shorter than 5-inch long, right?
Correct.
So it's all your instruments. If you're going to use physical eyes, you're not going to see love. You're also not going to see ideas, and you're not going to see microscopic particles, and you're not going to see DNA. You're not going to see the cellular energy that powers your iPhone or your Android or whatever. So you need other instruments. Now, to me, that's a logical statement. That's not faith. Anyone that doesn't accept that, to me, I don't know. I don't even know what to say. How could you? What I just said is scientific, pure science.
Yeah.
Just because you can't see it, there are other tools of how you figure out reality. Not everything is subject to the 5 senses. So in my chapter on God, in Torah Meaning for Life, I begin there by saying, what's reality? How do you define reality? So most of us begin with our 5 senses. What do I see, hear, taste, touch, and smell? But then you come to realize that if you close your eyes and your ears and your taste, touch, and smell, you're still left with plenty of reality. You don't disappear. You're left with feelings, with ideas, with all kinds of experiences. So how are you experiencing them without your senses? The answer is you need other senses or super senses, whatever you want to call them. And you climb slowly. So for a child, what you see is what you get. This is a table. You get a little older, you realize the table is made of wood, and wood is made up of elements, and elements are made up of molecules, and molecules are made up of atoms, and atoms are made up of subatomic particles, etc., etc. You keep going down. And that's what's called intelligence. And so to me, that if someone doesn't accept what I just said, you're definitely not going to get into the world of Atzilus and Ruchnius and Esos Spheres. They're not even understanding that there are things that make the world tick that we don't see with our eyes. That's, if you ask me, that's the place I'd begin. But again, I wouldn't make this into a crusade where you have to win, because I don't know what stops people, what blocks people, all kinds of things, their life experiences, etc., etc. And at the end of the day, this Gashmistic world is a very powerful world. And it does seduce our senses, and it does have its tentacles that doesn't let you get out of your Gashmistic and look at things. So that's why you have to find. That's why, by the way, most people who are not naturally spiritual, their spirituality comes when they suffer, when they're in pain. Why? Because their comfort zone had to be shaken up. Because they were too comfortable in their security blankets. They were refused to go into the world of spirit. And it was only a crack in their lives that, like Leonard Cohen says, the cracks in our lives is how the light gets in. Some people, the light doesn't get in if there's no crack because they're comfortable. I'm making money. I feel good. My family, I'm enjoying life. Then suddenly something doesn't work. Something's disrupted. That's one of the reasons, because their comfort zone is very powerful.
Yeah, it feels like people will take the ethereal and just dump it into this category of Amuna, and they can have such strong faith is this guy, but they don't see any. They don't think you can explore that realm at all. It's just they dump it into one big black hole called Amuna, and as far
Okay, look,
as
you have brought the conversation more into practically speaking to others. We're talking here things here that are obviously very high sublime levels.
but we
More
want
than
to
just
apply it. We want to apply it. We want the whole world to get into this. And so otherwise,
yeah,
there
but
can't be a
but you're
revelation.
talking about olives. But
Yeah.
you're talking about people that need to learn the ABC. They're not even getting into forget about something that's higher than neshama and guf. Some
Yeah.
people don't even, as you said, have a problem with neshama, let alone what's higher than the soul.
Uh, fair enough. Good point. Anyways, thank you.
It's not a contradiction. I have no problem discussing it in context of our personal relationships. But as you can imagine, much frustration as you have, I have met probably more people because I talk about this all the time. And that's how it is. Some people get it. Some people, for them, it's literally like breathing and doesn't require any type of a case have to be made. And for some, whatever reasons, they have different reasons. I've no longer, I've reached a point of my own maturity. I no longer judge or chat or question why people have their own blocks. Everybody has stuff. You try your best. You try to introduce it in a personal way. Frankly, I don't think it's an intellectual thing because I think it's maybe emotional resistance. A lot of people live in their heads and they want ethereal stuff, I think, can be threatening, especially if it's new and they are not familiar with it. Not threatening in a direct way. It's just like, they have their way of looking at things and they don't want to go into new worlds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think there are different types of people? I feel like I talked to some people.
For sure, there's some people are definitely naturally spiritually inclined. They're just wired to be more spiritual and they just think in more sublime terms. And others are not. But I think Chassidus can be taught to everyone. Remember, there's the psychology of Chassidus. I'm sure this fellow or other people have their challenges in life. They don't have it all figured out, right? So they all have to go into the world of ethereal one way or another. They may not call it ethereal. They'll call it whatever they want to call it. That's why I asked love, pain, psychological challenges. These are not physical things you can just empirically dissect. It's not like fixing your dishwasher,
Yeah, Shkok, thank you very much for indulging the discussion. Thank you very much.
What does it say about Hashem that the body gets older and weaker and finally dies?
What does it say about Hashem?
Yeah.
It says that Hashem doesn't get weaker and die. And Hashem leishanisi. What do you mean it says? It's a material world. The material world is a weak world. And after Chet Eitzadas, when we introduced the pollutants and the toxins of materialism, it compromised the Keli. And ultimately the Keli erodes, ages. And until Tchias HaMesim, when we refine the material world and the Guf is back to expressing Elokus, we're subject to illness and, God forbid, disease and death. That's the short of it.
By the way, I do think this discussion by the way, the whole class was on one pasuk here. I do think this was an appropriate time to talk about what about materialism reveals Elokus. I mean, it's dafka the topic.
Yeah, but you're talking about people who don't even begin to be receptive to Elokus or to anything ethereal. That's
correct. But you start with their terms. Talking to them on their terms is talking on the terms of the.
Let me put it this way: this discussion I would have probably offline, and it's not shot in Ayin Beis, that's for sure. It's talking about how to explain spiritual ideas. What you're saying is any mimer. How do you explain spiritual ideas to people who are not receptive to it for whatever reason?
Yeah. But the notion that the goof will and Lasila will reveal Elokus in a way that's more profound than or does join the topic. It does invite the topic.
To me, the problem is that they don't relate to neshama. Forget about guf. Even neshama.
Shkoyach, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, let's stop here by the words. Actually, the last words, Hu inyan ve'ein deimelach. Ein deimelach is the bittul of the nefesh, the oyer of ein. Okay, we'll stop here. 2/3 down the way, page 1443.